So there's so many different kinds of nets, it's really confusing. And I know you've got 3 here, and I was really thinking we could maybe talk about which
So
which
these
we
are
will use
the
and why.
winter ones.
Yeah.
And we'll start off probably with the plastic.
Yeah.
So kind of plastic's, you know, the ultimate really for
Yeah.
winter. It's really warm, stops the beds getting over wet.
Yeah.
You don't really need to have to water very much in winter. The main problem is them getting too wet.
Okay.
So, you know, a low tunnel or something like that, or a coal frame covered in plastics, really cheap, really quick, lasts a long time. So this plastic, horticultural grade plastic, which is treated so it doesn't degrade in UV light,
Yeah.
that's going to last you probably 10 years or something like that. So it's really robust.
Yeah.
And there's no microplastics or anything else coming off. The downside to this, of course, is when you get to this time of year, it's really hot,
Too hot,
and
yeah.
rain can't get through it.
Yeah.
Right? So this isn't ideal in summer,
No.
but in winter it's really great.
Yeah.
And you could probably double your yield by comparison with the alternatives that we're going to talk about
Yeah.
with plastic, by comparison with, you know, one of these meshes here. So I'll let you have that, Tess, and then we'll go on to fleece, I think. So kind of fleece is the kind of second best after plastic. Of course, the glass as well, but I won't talk about glass because it's not a mesh. So fleece is really warm,
Yeah.
and rain will go through it.
Yeah.
But if you water this, one of the things you'll find is that you might water here and it'll run and it'll soak through there, for example. So what you get is kind of underneath a big bed of fleece, you'll get some spots that are really wet and some spots that are really dry.
Yeah.
It also blocks more light than this.
Yeah,
plastic.
you can see it
You
there,
can
it's
see
less
straight
transparent.
away, you know, that you can see the grass clearly through here, and obviously you can't really see the grass very much through there. So in winter, when light is really at a premium, again, polythene's great, fleece isn't quite so good.
Yeah.
Fleece isn't quite as warm during the day, but actually fleece can be a little bit warmer at night.
Okay.
And the beauty of fleece is that the sun kind of beats down during the day and warms the ground up. And then the fleece acts like a bit of a blanket. You put it quite low on top of your plants. So let's imagine that's your plants. You kind of lay it on the top of your plants like that. And the plants, it's like a cozy fleece blanket, really.
Yeah.
It's in the name. And it just stops the heat escaping from the soil
Yeah.
and kind of traps it where the plants are. Polythene doesn't actually do that job quite as well, because heat radiating up from the soil just goes straight through the plastic up into the sky. So plastic isn't particularly warm. Fleece is a little bit better, but what you can do is you can use fleece with plastic on top.
Yeah.
So you can have a low tunnel or a polytunnel with plastic
Yeah.
high up. That's trapping all the heat during the day
Yeah.
and keeping a beautiful sort of growing environment. It's not too wet and all that sort of thing. And then fleece just laid over your plants traps the heat at night.
Perfect.
So these two, this one for night, this one for day, are a beautiful combination. When it starts warming up a little bit, something like this is really nice. So this, let's get that out of the way, is sort of thermocrop or envirotect.
Yeah.
And you can see that it's a woven sort of structure.
Yeah.
Seems that it's got a lot of holes in it,
Yeah.
but it's still actually reasonably warm. It's not as warm as fleece, it's not as warm as plastic, but it's warmer than most of the nets you would use for insect protection.
Yeah.
It's really flexible, it's kind of stretchy,
Yeah.
it doesn't tear, it's really strong. Fleece, this fleece here, this will easily rip.
Yeah.
You can't easily rip this stuff.
No.
It's really strong.
Right.
And so this will last many years. So I've got Envirotex sort of 5 years old and it's still doing really well. So I would use this, it's ideal I think in autumn, late autumn.
Yeah.
And it's really nice in spring. Not very good in winter because it doesn't trap enough heat.
Yeah.
I also use this though just to keep the pigeons off in spring. So
Yeah.
it works really nicely for that. So, for example, my purple sprouting broccoli will be covered in that.
Yeah.
So all the light still gets through, but no pigeons. And at a push, if it's really frosty,
Yeah.
then this actually is pretty useful as well. It
Yeah.
will just reduce frost damage if it's really, really cold and you've got nothing else that's better. And the nice thing about this in winter, if you do use it in winter, for that sort of, frost, little bit of frost protection, is that it doesn't matter what the weather throws at it,
Yeah.
it's not going to rip. We'll switch to the summer ones, which are behind you. We'll talk about these. So these are primarily now not used for any kind of to protect from the elements. These are used to protect from insects.
Okay.
We've got 4 different grades. We'll start off with this one. So this is bird netting. Really tough,
Yeah.
really cheap,
Yeah.
and keeps the pigeons off. And other birds probably as well. But for me, it's primarily pigeons. And one of the things I like about this is you can hardly see it.
Yeah.
So in this kitchen garden, where we don't want lots of ugly nets, I have quite a bit of this on.
Yeah.
And, so you can hardly see it, and it works really well to keep the pigeons off.
Yeah.
So next is this one, which is butterfly netting.
Yeah.
Again, it's really tough, lasts many, many years. And this is small enough, so it's about 8mm.
Yeah.
That'll keep the butterflies off. And it will also keep the pollinators off as well, so you've got to bear that in mind. So you wouldn't want to put that over something that you want the bees to get to,
Yeah.
or the hoverflies or whatever. But for brassicas primarily, where you want to keep the butterflies off so
Yeah.
you don't get caterpillars, that is my sort of preferred
Go-to.
one to go for.
Yeah.
Because what I find is that if you try and keep the smaller insects off, then you often find they somehow creep in there and you can't see them through these finer nets.
Yeah.
So you end up thinking, oh, these plants are doing really great, and then you take the nets off and they're covered in whitefly, or they're covered in black fly, or they're covered in cabbage aphid or something like that.
Yeah.
So this net, a little bit finer. This is debris netting. This is incredibly tough stuff, really great. This is an industrial product basically,
Yeah.
used by scaffolders and things like that to stop debris, hitting passers-by and things like that.
Yeah.
It's really great. You can buy it in big rolls. It's really cheap. It lasts a really long time.
Yeah.
This piece I just cut off a roll that I've been using for 7 years, and it's still in great condition.
Yeah.
And it's super cheap. So by comparison with these other nets that we've just been talking about, this could be a third to a quarter of the price of some of these other more expensive nets.
It'll
It's
last
not
you a long
particularly
time.
warm,
Yeah.
although it's fine enough that it will cut down the wind a little bit. So if you've got a really windy spot and you just want to reduce the wind just a touch,
Yeah.
then it is useful for that. I use that on all my permanent netted frames.
Yeah.
And because they're out in all weather, all year round,
Yeah.
year after year after year, it's just the toughest stuff you can get.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice, and it's fine enough that it keeps off most insect pests.
Yeah.
I'm just going to cut in here and talk about debris netting and its big theoretical problem, which is it's got down the centre of a roll these holes, and obviously these are big enough for some insects to get through, but in practical terms I've never found this to be an issue, because when I made my little sort of permanent mesh tunnels, I just folded the net over and stapled it down the centre here, and that means that the area with the holes overlaps with the wood, and so on both sides here there's good protection from most insects. And then this is kind of EnviroMesh is the brand name, but this, there's lots of alternatives now. It's a really fine net.
Yeah.
This will keep out pretty much everything. Bear in mind though that things might already be there.
Yeah.
So although you're keeping out new insects coming in, insects might already be underneath here.
Yeah.
So as I say, I often find that even though this will keep out whitefly and it will keep out blackfly and it will
Yeah.
keep out cabbage aphid, my beds often still get all of those pests
Yeah.
because they're either in the soil or they find some little nook or cranny
Yeah.
to work their way in, or while you're weeding they get in there,
And then they get trapped
or while you're
in there.
harvesting they get in there.
Yeah.
Often they're underneath here and it's so fine you can't see what's going on.
Yeah.
So I generally only use this for carrots,
Right.
just to keep out the carrot fly.
Yeah.
So, and this one actually is quite interesting because this looks like plastic, but it's actually made from, I think it's cornstarch or something like
right.
that. And so after a few years, when it starts to degrade, you can just put it on your compost bin.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but obviously, you know, it's way more expensive than that, for
That.
example, which does pretty much the same job.
Yeah.
And yeah, as I say, this one is beautiful because you can see through it so well.
Yeah.
You know, so I like this because I like to keep an eye on my plants.
Yeah.
So I think they're all the different nets that I use. And if I was to try and pick a favourite, I'd say this debris netting
Yeah.
I'll be using on anything that's kind of permanent.
Yeah.
So any mesh that's out permanently in the sun.
Yeah.
And this one, just because it's good enough to keep off most insects, but it's
Yeah.
also warm enough to use in the spring
Yeah.
to keep the beds warm. It's flexible and it's tough and it's reasonably cheap. And yeah, and I do have some big nets that you know, we sort of bought custom sizes for our big brassica beds,
Yeah.
where we just use this butterfly net. But we could get away with this green one as well, probably, if we could get it big enough.
Yeah.
I don't use fleece very much because it's just, you know, it just rips.
Yeah, it's
so
not very durable, is it?
rips so easily. And if you can kind of get a close up of that, you can see how fine this edge is here. And so this is
Yeah.
kind of dropping microplastics
Yeah,
kind of all the
fibres.
time.
Yeah.
And this only lasts 1 or 2 years. And you definitely don't want to leave that out in the sun because it really does degrade
Yeah.
quickly if you leave it in the sun. And polythene, yeah, you just can't beat it.
No.
You know, for polytunnels, low tunnels, coal frames and things like that.
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference to the yield in winter.
Yeah.
There we go.
Amazing. That was really a show.